in 10 seconds. Hi, good day, everyone. My name is Michael Lusignan. We're just going to give it a couple minutes here. It's 12 p.m. Eastern time. I know many of you are joining respectively on your lunch hour and such. So we'll give everyone a couple moments just to be able to join the Zoom, and then we'll start. Thank you for your patience. Hi, everyone. For those joining, I'm just seeing that we have a lot of participants still joining. My name is Michael Lusignan. We're going to be starting in another moment. We wanted to give everyone an opportunity, just as it's one past at the lunch hour here in the Eastern time zone. Many people might be coming from other meetings and such, and then we'll get started in another minute. Okay, great. So welcome to everyone for joining our webinar event today on emerging technologies to combat financial crimes. Also, just a heads up to everyone, this event is being recorded and being live streamed as well. A little bit of an introduction on myself. My name is Michael Lusignan. I'm a program director with Lassonde Professional Development at the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University. So a very big thank you for taking the time today to join our discussion on the emerging technologies to combat financial crimes. We typically gather a global audience for these events, so welcome to wherever you might be joining in the world, in whichever time it is where you're located. As I mentioned, it's just a little past 12 p.m. Eastern time here. And I understand that we all are joining virtually today for this event, and it would be and it's great that we're able to meet virtually because it enables us to bring really a global community together here for these virtual events. We are hoping into 2023 to be able to host events back up on York's Keele campus, possibly even at the Bergeron Center. I've been back on campus the last couple of weeks. I was actually just up there the other day, and it's really great to see that everyone's back and everyone's walking around. So it's a really good sight to see now. We are looking at ways of how we can integrate these events, both in person while being able to maintain a global community virtually. So for a complete introduction with all of our panelists that are joining us today, their bios are available on the Eventbrite page for this event. So if you're looking for any more additional details, but as a high level, just wanted to introduce our panelists. So first off, we have Dr. Uyen Nguyen. She is an associate professor at the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University. Her research interests are in the areas of wireless networking, mobile computing, social media, cybersecurity, financial technology, and applications of AI and machine learning. Thank you, Uyen, for joining us. And as well, we have Reza Soltani. Reza is a solutions architect and a PhD researcher at York University, specializing in user-centric and privacy-respecting digital identity networks. Thank you, Reza, for joining as well. So a couple of housekeeping reminders before we begin. Again, this event is being recorded and live streamed through some various platforms right now, as well as a disclaimer. Anything being discussed during this webinar should not be considered investment advice. This is for academic research discussion purposes only. And with respect to questions from the audience, how we're going to conduct today's webinar, we'll be opening the floor up for a Q&A session later on in the webinar portion. So we want this event to be interactive. It's just we only have 60 minutes with everyone today. We have a lot of great discussion that's going to be happening with Uyen and Reza, and we want to make sure though that we have time at the end to answer all of your questions. As well, a focus for today's discussion will be on the technological elements. I understand there's a lot going on in the regulatory landscape on this topic, but we're really going to be focusing on the technology for today's discussion. So to get our discussion started today, wanted to start off and maybe for everyone to get a little bit a chance to get to know our panelists a little bit more and what really drew their interest in this. So Uyen, maybe I'm going to start with you if that's okay. I wanted to get your insight in what really drew your interest to the technology really in the financial crimes field.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the seminar. As you mentioned earlier, Michael, my research has been in wireless communications, mobile computing, social media, and cybersecurity. And as we all know, cybersecurity is a crucial component in financial systems. So at least 4 of my former graduate students right now are working for different banks in the GTA. And several years ago, one of the students was working full-time for a bank while doing his master's part-time. And that's why he knew where the financial system could be improved or changed. And he proposed several research topics for his thesis. And he involved other students in my research lab in the research as well. And that's how my research team and I got into financial technology. And as a natural progression, from there, we got into financial crimes as part of financial technology solutions. And Reza is one of the PhD students in my research lab.
That's great, Uyen. So it sounds like you had that cross collaboration with your graduate students that really got you interested in this this area of study. So we're going to see Reza as well. Going to pose the same question to you as well, just to get a little bit more visibility on what really drew your interest to the technology in the financial crimes field.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon. So what drew me to this field initially was my background in cybersecurity and digital identity. Several years ago, I began researching in digital identity, and I realized how important it is, how it's a foundation to security and trusted transactions. And then I started exploring like different use cases and applications of digital identity in the financial fraud and the financial crime space. And I noticed how it's such a big problem financial crime is, and how little of it we're solving. And that led me to realize that there's so much opportunity on the research side, on the technology side, for us researchers to work on. And that sort of led me to work on a bunch of different projects on the financial crime side, and here we are.
That's great, Reza. And I know I've seen this myself in terms of that digital identity and where it's really just getting started in terms of the future developments. So thank you both for sharing what tweaked your interest into this emerging area. We do have, as this event is virtual, we wanted to make sure it was easier for our participants and guests joining us today to be able to follow along with some of the discussions, especially everyone's joining us with a different entry point in terms of understanding this emerging area. And to help facilitate this, both Reza and Uyen have graciously prepared a couple of slides too to just help bring along the discussion as well. So Reza, maybe to get the discussion started as well, and everyone, please feel free to follow along as well. Really, I'm trying to get some your thoughts on what are some of the technological skills that you're seeing becoming really useful for financial crimes practitioners. As this is a new emerging area, wanted to get your thoughts on what you're seeing right now.
So as far as the skill sets, there's actually a range of different skill sets that we may want to talk about. One of the biggest one is analytics, is AI and machine learning engineering and analysts skill sets. Being able to make sense of the data is a key thing. Being able to understand the relations, the patterns. That's an important skill to have, to be able to identify suspicious transactions and clean transactions, and be able to know the factors and the patterns that differentiate the two. So having a good analytical skills and having some AI or machine learning background, AI engineering background would be very helpful here. And then there are also skill sets around payment systems, cryptocurrencies, the fintech tech stack. Those are also really helpful to be able to understand the financial crime and their topologies and how to fight them. If you'd like to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, Uyen as well. Do you have anything you'd want to add?
Right. Yeah. So I would like to add to what Reza just said. In addition to machine learning and AI, we also need to understand about data science as well, because machine learning and AI requires data, and we need to process, to clean, to remove duplicates data, to store data. But then at the end of the day, we need to analyze the output, the data, using math, statistics, visualization, in order to get insights into business making decision. And one important aspect of AI is the ethics. So what it means is most applications of AI use huge volumes of data. In that process, user privacy and security may be compromised. So we need to respect the law and regulation. The AI and component, the process must be transparent and accountable. They have to be objective and equitable and secure and accurate. And at the same time, we need to focus on privacy enhancing technology as well. For example, privacy by design, using methods to reduce the need for data for training in order to minimize leaks or privacy invasion or breach. We use method to protect the privacy without reducing the data as well. That's another way. And again, we need to understand cybersecurity principles and concepts such as access control, firewalls, malware prevention, incident management, system monitoring, and many other aspects of cybersecurity.
Exactly. That's where, as this is really an emerging field, all these other considerations really in terms of, and you touched on this, Uyen, is the, the regulatory elements aside, which is, continuously evolving right now, especially the data sets that AI is, bringing in and the governance around that. That's really going to be, but the technology itself is moving so rapidly. Is that what we're seeing right now?
Yes, it is. It's moving so rapidly that governments and regulators are not able to keep up with the pace. For example, cryptocurrency, they're still working on regulations, even though it's been there for a long time.
Exactly. So I think there's more to come definitely with respect to all of that. Wanted to see too, with the time that we have, Reza, was there anything that maybe with our audience that joined us today, I know you had prepared a couple of key elements maybe to review. Did you want to spend some time and we can kind of go through some of the items that maybe you thought that were top of mind, emerging, what our panelists should be keeping in mind that's going to really impact, especially we have a lot of business professionals joining us today for this webinar. So just wanted to see if maybe we can spend some time and discuss what they should keep top of mind as well.
Yeah, sounds good. So we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation which covers some of the latest or some existing and latest trends in combating financial crime. So we can go through the slides and then have a QA session afterwards.
Great. Yeah. Did you want to get started and we can?
Yes, sounds good. Let's start. All right. So give me one moment. Just want to confirm that everyone can see the screen and the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm sharing the screen. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So this part of the this presentation shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. So I'll make sure that I'll time it, make sure it doesn't go beyond that, because there's just so much to cover as far as what's trending. But we sort of picked a subset of what we think we can fit into the next 30 minutes. So, but I'm going to start from the basic. I'm going to go over some of the basic elements of financial crime, and then we'll go through the different ways of identifying and combating the different types of financial crime. And then we have a couple of slides on the technological complexities associated to building technologies and solutions to fight these sort of crimes. So, so let's begin. All right, so as we know, financial crime is a very hot topic at present, and the pandemic sort of accelerated and caused a lot of the transactions to move online, right? And we're seeing this whole digitization or digital transformation happening across different industries. And that sort of created opportunities for customers, for users, but also a lot of opportunities for frauds and cyber crimes and financial crimes in general. And so financial crime refers to all sorts of crimes committed by an entity that involves taking money or other properties that belong to someone else to be able to obtain financial or professional gain. And so financial crime threatens the safety and soundness of financial systems worldwide. So it's a big problem. And so the people, the individuals or entities that commit these sort of crimes, they range from simple, basic, individuals to small groups to sophisticated rings or to enterprises or terrorist groups. So there's a variety of different types of culprits and fraudsters. And then there's also many types of financial crime, ranging from fraud, cybercrime, money laundering, which is like when you funnel cash or other funds generated from illegal activity, and then you pass that through legitimate financial institutes and accounts to be able to hide, conceal the source of the funds. So money laundering is a big problem, but financial crime covers money laundering and many other types of fraud. And so it's a growing field, and that's partly because these days it's very easy for fraudsters to get into this space, to be able to commit fraud. For example, it costs as little as $9 US to acquire a ready-to-use stolen card, and it takes about 9 minutes. About 9 minutes for the new data that's been stored in the dark web to be put to use for identity theft, right? So, and we're seeing a lot of change and improvements in a way in the technologies and the tools and the resources that are available to fraudsters to be able to commit different types of financial crime. So it is a really big problem. It's a costly problem, and I have some stats here.
Reza, I just wanted to ask you, and this is great,
yes.
Really in terms of the technological complexity, How has that evolved really over the last couple of years? I know with the amount and the rapid pace of digital transformation, just wanted to see what you've been seeing in terms of how the actual technological complexity has evolved.
So I actually have a couple of slides at the end of this presentation specifically about complexity that we're seeing, but there is many factors. I have like a list of different things that we can go through.
Great.
Which are, I mean, there are different categories of factors. So if you like, we can do that at the end of the presentation, because I can then visualize the factors.
Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. So, so just to show some stats, so financial crime yields close to 1.6 trillion every year, and that's about 2.7% of the global GDP, and that's about as much as Canada's GDP. And the problem is that only 1% of these crimes are caught. And also the actual cost of financial crime is more than what it appears to be. So for example, for every dollar of commerce fraud, you're looking at $2.27 as the actual total cost. Same thing when the frauds are committed through the cell phones. The stats are slightly different, but usually the actual cost is more than what it appears to be. And that diagram I have in the bottom right, that just shows the cost of financial crime compliance just in US, and we see that it's steadily growing. So it is a costly problem. It is a big problem, and so that's why we have to see how we can use technology, use regulation, use proper policies, and use awareness to be able to combat it. So that's just some stats to understand the problem. The next thing I have is actually talking about the emerging technologies in the financial crime. So to be able to do this, I have sort of divided the approaches into three different categories. On the left side, I have the more primitive, the more basic, more traditional, I should say, rule-based approach, where the banks are using this approach at the moment. They use a rule-based engine to be able to cover a series of conditions of rules. For example, if the banks identify, if they see a transaction that is, let's say, above $1,000 and it's originating from somewhere outside of Canada, that could trigger a notification, a suspicious notification alert, right? So this approach is rule-based. It's the rules are supposed to be, they're different for every type of fraud, and they're supposed to match the patterns of those transactions that are involved in the fraudulent activities, right? So the rules are static; they don't evolve as fast as the fraudulent activities evolve, and they're labor intensive because in many cases they have to be manually entered in and managed. But it's the most basic approach to understand the process. But again, it's not scalable. It's not adaptive to the changes that we're seeing. The second approach, the semi-automated risk-based approach, which is a method that many banks utilize, is more about analyzing a large volume of data. There is some AI components, and the AI component analyzes the transactions. It tries to find patterns. And if it identifies any suspicious patterns, then it will trigger notification for the operators, for the financial providers to then do further investigation. There is an element of KYC. There's ID verification, client onboarding, and KYC is know your customer. And there's also a transaction monitoring component, which again ties into that whole analytics and AI, which again tries to recognize anomalies and suspicious behavior in the transactions. And then the approach on the right side, which is, I guess, the more emerging, the more recent approach is the full automation or a self-learning method that relies on advanced AI, advanced pattern recognition, and smart background checks, name screening, and better identity management and KYC, smarter KYC, smarter ID, to be able to improve the security, reduce the fraud, and at the same time, enhance the customer experience and the user onboarding. Because, I mean, we have some slides about KYC that I'll share in a minute, but the user onboarding, the user registration aspect of any service is not something that users are interested in. Like, no user wakes up and decide, gets excited about filling out another form. No one likes the registration aspect of any service. So there are research or work, there are activities happening in this field to be able to maintain the security and reduce the fraud, but at the same time, improve the user experience and streamline the onboarding process.
So Reza, I just wanted to ask you, building on that point, because this is a really key fact, and I wanted to ask is this really around the, let's say, an account open process when someone's going through the institution is doing that initial onboarding to make sure, so KYC is know your client, know your customer. So is that really where that initial point at the account open is going to be so key now, is knowing who you're dealing with?
That's right. So KYC, or the client onboarding phase, is one of the weakest points of the whole customer management lifecycle, right? You have to know who your customers are. You have to know who your businesses are, your clients are. And so, yes, KYC is mostly used during the client onboarding, but the background check and the name screening and the passive KYC can also happen. It can be an ongoing thing. It can happen behind the scene continuously. So some of the ID verification happens during KYC or during the client onboarding when a customer approaches a bank, whether physically or through their mobile phone or through their through their PC, and wants to open an account. But there's also passive KYC, passive ID verification, and passive name screening that can happen behind the scene and happen regularly.
Great.
All right. So so moving on. So I've divided the approaches into 3 different phases. There are other ways of dividing these methods, but again, I've divided into 3 different phases to be able to make it easier to understand the differences. So now I'm going to move on to explaining a little bit about some of the trends, some of the new technologies and approaches that we've identified. And again, because we have limited time, we only focus on certain aspects of the technologies and methods to fight financial crime. There's a lot more. There's so much more that we can talk about, but we've focused on graph analytics and contextual monitoring and a few other things I'll explain in a minute. But one of the key things is graph analytics and contextual monitoring. And this is because, well, before talking about graph analytics, I want to have a point there. I want to talk about the common issues, right? I want to first emphasize that what are the issues that we're trying to solve, and also what are the requirements of any sort of new AI component or any solution that is supposed to fight crime. And so, as far as the issues, we should be building something that deals with fragmented data, because the way data is managed now, it's very fragmented, it's siloed, right? And this is a big problem, not just in bank industry, but also in many other spaces. So we're seeing more activity, we're seeing more ideas around how to bring the data together to be able to make more sense of it, better sense of it, and be able to reduce the false positives and make more accurate predictions. We're also seeing problems with insufficient and unverified information. How do we verify that data? How do we fill in for the data that is missing, right? How do we do feature engineering or data engineering to be able to guess with a good accuracy what the missing data should be? Because missing data, inaccurate data, leads to inaccurate risk classification, and that's a big problem, and that leads to false positives. And banks and many other financial institutes deal with large volume of false positives, because that leads to misclassification. That leads to categorizing a suspicious transaction as clean and also miscategorizing a good transaction as fraudulent, right? So we want to avoid that sort of problem, and for that we need sufficient data. We need verifiable data, and so those are some of the problems that we have to address. And then as far as the requirements, we thought about this and we put together some requirements, some items that we think a solution should have. And one is accuracy. Any sort of solution, whether it's AI or not, that is supposed to help with identifying financial criminal activities, fraudulent activities, should be accurate, right? It should also be automated or semi-automated, because we want to reduce the manual work. And it should be auditable, whether that's during the development of the solution or during its inference or execution when it's making decisions. Because, I mean, this is particularly important for compliance. And this is because you want to be able to understand how a system has derived to its results, how it produced its results, so that you can share that with the departments and with the customer, and to be able to explain why their transaction didn't go through or why their account was not opened, right? So auditability and transparency is important here. We also want consistency, so that given the same set of inputs, we get the same type of output every time, right? So whatever solution we build has to have that consistency in place. And finally, cost effectiveness and scalability. We need a system to be able to scale and be able to deal with large volume of data. It's easy to prototype an AI solution. It's easy to prototype a solution that can look at transactions in a small graph data structure, but it gets very complicated when you want to actually expand and cover large volume of information from all sorts of data sources, and then be able to make sense of it, process it, and index it, and so on. So whatever solution we build has to be scalable, has to be sustainable, and again, has to be cost effective. So those are some of the requirements that we put together, and I went through the common issues. But again, going back to the what's trending, I've covered data integration across providers. That's something that is ongoing. There's a lot of conversations and activity around how can we bring data together. Because that causes all sorts of problems, and there's all sorts of compliance and regulatory and privacy laws in place. Banks or financial institutes don't want to just share their financial and PII, personal identifiable information, their sensitive information, with others. So there's a lot of activity on how we can do this in a secure privacy manner and be able to put our data together, build better AI models to make better decisions.
That's a great point, Reza, you made, is looking at, let's say, when you're taking all the data for instance, on a test environment, let's say in a smaller group as part of research, it's much different than if you have, let's say, millions of transactions going through in a production environment, right? So that distinction between really getting something from a smaller, let's say, research environment versus in production, where it's going through, running on a, call it a 24/7 production basis, it's a much different pivot to get it to that stage of operations.
That's absolutely right. Yes, and this issue just is not specific to the financial space. It's a problem you see across the board, in many different industries and many different fields. It's easy to prototype. It's easy to build a simple, Python script, program that does things really accurately based on some test data. But when you actually think about how you're going to deploy it and how you're going to maintain it and how you're going to update it, how you're going to have that feedback loop for your AI component, that's where it gets really tricky, right? And so that's important. And that means that you have to know what sort of team, you have to think ahead and know what sort of team and resources you need to build your solution, and what sort of companies you want to work with if you want to build and also maintain. Because building a prototype, easy, but maintaining it needs resources and funding and roadmap and strategies in place. So yeah, that's right. So continuing on, I have continuous and contextual monitoring, and this is another area where we have a lot of progress, and this ties nicely with the graph analytics and AI, because essentially with contextual monitoring, we're going beyond transaction monitoring. We're not just looking at individual transactions or a set of transactions. We're looking at every data point that is available to us, right? So we're looking at account information, transaction information. We're looking at the device fingerprints. We're looking at the behavioral biometrics, if available. We're looking at all the connections and relations to an account. And we're putting all this together. We're putting the graph structure, and we're applying different types of graph theory, graph algorithms on this data structure, on these relations, to be able to extract intelligence, to be able to extract useful analytics, and be able to identify fraudulent activities. For example, I mean, there's all sorts of graph algorithms, but one is like the page rank, which used to be used for Google, or shortest path, which can tell you the shortest path between two nodes, two elements in a graph, right, in a graph data structure. And how that helps is, like, let's say you have a fraudulent activity on one side of your graph, and you have another new account created on another side of your graph, and you want to find the shortest path between these two nodes. And your criteria is, your requirement is, if the shortest path, if the number of hops or nodes between these two accounts, between these two nodes, is, let's say, less than 4, that can classify this new account as a fraudulent account. So, so that sort of analytics can happen based on, because we have this graph relationship in place. And so PageRank, shortest path, and algorithms around finding clusters of similar accounts, finding rings and communities in a graph, finding anomalies and patterns and similarities. All of those different types of analytics and algorithms can be applied on a graph. And so, yes.
Oh, Reza, I just wanted to ask is, in terms of the no-code querying, maybe for the audience that might not be familiar with no code, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes. So as we're seeing improvements on how the data is stored and how the data is visualized, we're also seeing trend of how the data can be queried, right? So we're seeing movements, we're seeing activity on the ways that operators can query the data, extract intelligence and extract information from their data sets, right? So, for example, if you look at a graph SQL engine or a graph engine like Neo4j, this is a popular graph engine. You can insert in data, as you can insert in nodes and edges and form graphs, but once you want to query the graph, once you want to get information from the graph, you don't use the common SQL language. You actually use a different language that is designed to work with the graph. It's more intuitive, it's more human friendly, it's more easily understood, and so the query language is different, and it's more geared again towards the graph data structure. We're also seeing activity around not using a language anymore, not writing code anymore to be able to query, but rather use visual elements and widgets to be able to construct a query and pass that to the database engine, run it against the database to be able to get some results. And this is helpful because then the operators, in the compliance or the fraud department, when they're trying to extract certain data from the query, they don't have to get into understanding the syntax and all the little things of how to run a SQL query or how to run the Neo4j query. They just have to use a UI, a user interface, and use the visual elements to be able to construct their the queries that they want to run.
It's really definitely evolved. No, this is some great points you're raising, Reza, around this. And just wanted to make sure, just as a time check, we have about 5 minutes before we're going to open the floor to Q&A. So Reza, just wanted to see too some of the top of mind elements that both you, Reza, and Uyen, as with the material that you wanted to talk to us on today. Is there anything that we maybe want to just focus on with the 5 minutes that we have remaining?
Yes. So if you have 5 minutes, then I'll go quickly through the next slide, and then I'll cover the slide after that. I think I should have time for the next.
Great, yeah, because we want to make sure we have enough time to open the floor for questions. I see some questions coming in as well, but as I mentioned, we're going to open the floor for questions after. So continue, Reza.
Sounds good. So we've done some research in this field, and I mean, just to go quickly over it, we've surveyed about over 50 research papers, and we identified that, I mean, some highlights. I'll share them here real quickly. We noticed that supervised learning, which is a class of algorithms that use label data to train, they perform better than the unsupervised, but there's a lot of movement happening in the unsupervised learning area as well to be able to find clusters. Overall, SVM, support vector machines, random forest, and neural network algorithms perform better. And also, there is a lack of data. You know, there's limited access to real data and fraudulent, especially the fraudulent data, to be able to train and test these AI models, right? So, and that leads to what's called imbalanced data, right? So about only 1% of the data sets that we've looked at is fraudulent activity, and that's not good. We want to be able to have more of those to be able to train our AI model. And so because of that, there are ways through AI, like using GANs, generative adversarial network, which is a type of neural network, to sort of create synthetic data. As far as AI trends, I'll just touch on federated learning, which is a way to do sort of a decentralized learning. So, and that helps with preserving the privacy and security. And that allows every bank, every institute to do their AI training without sharing their data with the other banks. So there's a lot of activity happening in the federated learning. And also in the AI explainability and interpretation, there's a lot of research activity going on there too. So that's all I'll cover on this slide, in the interest of time. KYC is super important. There's a lot of work going on around KYC, advanced name screening using facial recognition, using advanced contextual analytics and NLPs, and accessing many different data sources, and not just PEPs, political exposed persons database, and sanction lists, but going beyond and covering every sort of data source we can to be able to produce more accurate risk scores about the customers. And then we're seeing a lot of research around smart IDs, which make decisions on behalf of the customer. So this is like when you go to the form and you want to fill out a form, and Chrome, your browser will automatically auto-complete the form for you. This is like one step, after that's one iteration after, where your wallets, your digital wallets, makes decisions on your behalf. So you encounter a bank website, you're opening a bank website, and the bank is asking you for certain credentials, verifiable credentials, and your smart wallet will make that decision, will read that request, understands it, and it will prepare the proof or prepare the response. You approve it, and it will send it back to the bank. Reusable IDs, ID networks, and trust frameworks. That's also a really big topic, and it's all about the users being able to do the KYC, or the customers be able to do KYC in one bank and be able to use the information they got or the verification they got from that one bank to be able to interact with other banks without needing to go and repeat that whole, boring and time-consuming KYC process, right? And so we're seeing a lot of activity in this field in Canada, US, elsewhere. We're also seeing how there are conversations around connecting the banks from different countries, different jurisdictions, so that if you open a bank in Canada, you're able to use your KYC information, your identity information that the bank has certified to open a bank, to open an account in Europe somewhere, right? So that sort of activity is also very active. And we have some research paper on this topic and also on the analytics topic, and they're available to read. How much time do I have? Because I mean,
you know what, maybe if there's what was interesting, I think, if you wanted to move towards, is some of the technological complexities and challenges. Maybe we can spend about 2 minutes on that portion, Reza, because I think that some of the research that both you and Uyen are really doing in this area. That's where I think our audience really from today's call might be interested in hearing, because in our discussions and preparation for this, I know that you've uncovered a lot in this space. So how does that sound if maybe we focus on that from with some of the time we have remaining?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go through the slides where I have what you just mentioned. So I have 2 slides on the technological complexities and challenges. So I'll go through the list, and I can pause at any part where there are questions. As far as complex and changing financial system, we're seeing digitization. I mean, I briefly touched on that in the intro. We're seeing, the rapid digitization, partly because of COVID. We're seeing the globalization and more cross-border payments. We're seeing more growth in real-time transactions, and also in the volume of the data, and also new methods to do transact. I mean, we have IoT devices and Apple Watches and all sorts of different things that can help you make transactions. And so these things, they contribute to the complexity of understanding the space and be able to analyze it, be able to make sense of it, and be able to distinguish between clean transactions and clean accounts, and the fraudulent ones. On the regulatory side, we're seeing a lack of regulatory guidance, different interpretation. So for example, you have GDPR. It's a really helpful framework, but it's interpreted in different ways, and that contributes to the complexity of what sort of security controls or privacy controls you have to implement. And then we have privacy concerns again. So I mean, we're slowly realizing the value of our data. There are new frameworks, new policies, and so that sort of I mean, that's a good thing. We want to protect our data, but at the same time, we want to be able to do proper KYC and do proper contextual monitoring and transaction monitoring. And so that's also another factor into that causes the systems, the solutions to be a little bit more complex. And then we're seeing more sophisticated attacks. So synthetic identity, this is the fastest growing sort of fraud in the US, the frauds that happen through synthetic identities. And this is partly because there are many forms of creating synthetic identity. The data, when a site gets breached, the data sets are quickly put on dark web and elsewhere, so they're easily accessible. And so fraudsters, they use that data, they mix it with real data, and they produce new profiles, new customers. And in many cases, they can fool the facial rec, the ID verification that uses facial verification, facial recognition, using the synthetic data or using deep fake, right? There's a lot of progress, a lot of activity happening in the deep fake area. The AIs are getting better and better. And so the growth in deep fake and the improvements in the synthetic data field sort of makes this whole, fighting these sort of fraudsters more complicated. And we're seeing more of social engineering, especially after the COVID started and people started working from home. A lot of social engineering and spams and different types of scams have become more, they've grown more. And then we're also seeing new forms of malware, new, more sophisticated tools. Like, for example, going back to the deep fake, the tools that allow you to create deepfakes, they're becoming more and more popular. There are actually deepfakes as a service now. There are providers that provide deepfakes because not every fraudster has the technical skills and the time to build a deepfake from scratch. So they're now, they're now offering those things as a service. So the tools that the fraudsters use have become more advanced. The tools that we use, the good guys on the good side use, also have evolved. And that's why, I mean, I mentioned that whole graph analytics and how, the no code querying of the graph analytics, that's like one step towards making it easier for the people on our side to understand the tools.
And that's exactly it, Reza. We're really seeing this in terms of the rapid advancement of technology, especially over the last 2 years. has really been transformational, and really being able to catch up. And I have to say, the information both you, Reza, and Uyen have prepared today is great. And I want to make sure we we have an opportunity to open the floor to questions. And this was the balance that we were trying to find, is we only have an hour with everyone. And I do want to explain to everyone what we're working on at Lassonde Professional Development is a course, actually, a program offering that's going to be called Financial Crimes and Countermeasures. The plan is to launch this in 2023. So please definitely take a look on our website for all of our program offerings that we do offer. The website address, we can put it into the chat as well, but it's lassonde.yorku.ca/LassondePD. Also, if you want additional information about this offering, you can email us directly at asklpd@lassonde.yorku.ca, and we'll definitely get back to you. Just wanted to mention that because as we only have a limited amount of time with everyone, this is something that we've been actually collaborating. I've been working very closely with Uyen on the development of this offering. And if you're interested in knowing more about this field, this is why we're seeing this in the industry right now, especially. So a big thank you to Uyen and Reza for joining us today and preparing this great presentation. I've had the chance, actually, when I joined Lassonde PD over the summer, I had a chance to connect with Uyen virtually that first week. So a very big thank you to Uyen as well for the very warm welcome that I've had here joining York and Lassonde as well. It's a great team, so thank you. So we're going to open up the floor right now for questions. I do see some coming in into the chat right now. There was a question, maybe just to backstep a little bit, Reza. I think it's just building on, I think, a bit of the no-code element aspect is looking at the term NSQL. That came in the feed. I just wanted to make sure if you might be familiar with, they're asking, is it related to NSQL? Any thoughts on that? Are you familiar, or maybe
Sorry,
we can move on?
Sorry, was it NoSQL or NSQL?
Yeah, they were, I think, asking just if it's related to NSQL.
I'm not familiar with NSQL, but
okay. That's fine. So that, I think, answers that one question that came in. We had a question from Rafi around, do we feel that because of the transaction speed needed, is the security going to be compromised? So trying to balance, I think, between the importance of maintaining security, but trying to keep a rapid transaction speed. What's your thoughts, Uyen and Reza, on this?
So yes, that's true. That's a good question. There's a balance between security and transaction speed. So currently, the practice or the consensus is security is the most important component of the system. So yes, we may compromise part of the speed, but again, security is the top priority. And when we talk about the speed, again, it depends on the application as well. For example, in a stock trading, speed is important. But on the other hand, an interact transaction, the speed could be a few minutes. That's acceptable. But for stock trading, the speed is important. So in that sense, there should be a trade-off between security and speed. So what it means is, in a trust trading system, the investment should be higher so that we can ensure both security and speed. with an interact transaction system, we can compromise on speed, but we have to make sure that security is guaranteed.
And that's a great point, Uyen. And just for the benefit, as we do have a global audience on these calls, the Interact network is the one of the financial networks that all the big banks in Canada use for debit transactions specifically. It also has, they built on e-transfer functionality on top of that as well. So customers amongst the institutions can send, but it's primarily used for debit card transactions, just for everyone's awareness. And that's a great point, Uyen.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for the clarification.
Yeah, because we do have a global audience sometimes on these, and they might not be familiar with Interact and such. So we did have another question that came in around the discussion appears to be focusing on the external hacks to financial institutions. Jeffrey's looking to understand a little bit better, how does this apply to privileged access, credential abuse, and in the bank? So I'm thinking maybe this is looking more from an internal, it sounds like an internal risk, like with an internal actor, is making sure credential access and such. Any thoughts on, let's say, internal actors within an institution and any of the security elements involved?
Well, my thought is that so insider threats is a big problem. I mean, it's a big category under the financial crime, and so that whole customer onboarding process should apply to the employee onboarding process as how we onboard the employees as well. We have to do our due diligence and our thorough name screening, background check on the employees as well. But also, I think the contextual monitoring and the transaction monitoring can also be helpful in this for identifying this sort of fraudulent activity, because then once you have everything visualized through a graph, you're able to see any sort of activity between the insiders, the people on the inside, and some of the criminals on the outside. So that sort of those sort of patterns will be recognized, will be identified through the graph relations. That's my thought on this. But quickly going back to the previous question that was asked about transactions and the speed and the friction, I think so. When it comes to security, obviously security is critical. We have to maintain a good security posture and be able to verify every transaction. And so at the same time, like I said, we don't want to introduce too much friction, too much delay, latency on the customer's experience side, because I have the stats on my slide, but customers, if the registration, for example, takes less than 10 minutes, they just cancel the whole thing. And as far as payments, I think it's a much longer or much shorter time frame, maybe 2-3 minutes. If the transaction takes longer than that, they'll just abandon their shopping cart. And there is about 70% of the shopping carts are abandoned. That's like based on the stats of the last year, for many different reasons, including the delays with the processing of the transaction. But then also at the same time, a little bit of friction is necessary to be able to verify the transactions. So sometimes you need to have that friction to be able to do thorough background checks on your customers and be able to verify their transaction. And if the customers understand that and they can get that information, that feedback through a nice user interface, through a good user experience, then that can solve the confusions that the customers may have. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to raise. That I mean, we're always aiming for real-time transactions and high security, but sometimes you have to compromise, and in some areas, adding a little bit of friction to understand what is going on is necessary.
It is definitely a delicate balance, Reza. So, a lot of great insights that you, Reza, and Uyen have put together. We have one more question, and then I think we're going to be at time, is just around where are you seeing in your research around where the majority of crimes are originating more. Is it from debit, credit cards, or other types of transactions? What are you seeing right now?
I mentioned that synthetic identity fraud is a big problem. It's the fastest growing type of fraud in US. So we're seeing a lot of activity there. We're seeing a lot of account takeovers or fraudulence mixing fake and realistic identities to be able to impersonate legitimate customers. That's the area that I see a lot of activity. I mean, there's also a lot of changes and evolvements happening on the money laundering side that we're monitoring and we're looking at on the research side of things. But my focus these days is how synthetic data, how data is captured from the dark web, how it's then put together with fake data to be able to create legitimate users, and then use that information along with deepfake to bypass ID verifications and facial recognition.
This has been a great discussion today, Uyen and Reza. We could go on for a very long time on this topic. There's so much, and we were only really able to touch on a couple of key areas. But again, wanted to reiterate to everyone, we are in development of a financial crimes and countermeasures offering. So keep a lookout for that. If you have any other additional questions, please feel free to reach out at asklpd@lassonde.yorku.ca. I saw that info had gone into the chat, so feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to connect with you. Again, thank you, Uyen, Reza. We're just at time. So thank you, everyone, all of our participants for joining today's time. And hopefully everyone found this discussion insightful. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.